Again, this is subchapter 4.1.2, and it is being entitled Leading Diagonal Guidelines. A leading diagonal, like mentioned earlier, is easy to be recognized as it is usually taking the shape of a wedge. But again, this is not mandatory. What's mandatory is that the leading diagonal moves within the trend line formed by the end of the first wave to the end of the third wave and projected forward, and by a trend line that connects the end of the second wave and the end of the fourth wave and connected forward. What is always happening on a leading diagonal is the fact that the overlapping process appears. Like explained here, this is the overlapping process. If this is the second and this is if this is the first and this is the fourth, this is overlapping. Or like here you have 1, 2, 3. The fourth comes and overlaps with the second wave, or at least to be within the distance of 10% of doing so, like explained on the recordings earlier. Such a phenomenon is allowed when dealing with leading diagonals, not with impulsing. Also, like mentioned earlier, if you take on the leading diagonal a trend line from the end of the first wave here, connected with the end of the third wave, and projected forward, it should be noted that price action on the fifth wave here has the tendency to establish a new high when compared with the high on the third wave, but not to touch this trend line. But this is not mandatory, this is not a rule, okay? It is more like a guideline. It has the tendency of doing so, but sometimes it may just come and get it. This is more like a guideline, like I told you. Now, under the guidelines for leading diagonals, we should take into consideration at this thing. Also, it is more likely than the second wave of a leading diagonal to be usually a zigzag or a zigzag family pattern. As you see here in our example on the US dollar Canadian dollar daily chart, this second wave here, it is definitely a zigzag, as this is an ABC, so this is a zigzag, an X, and then a combination for the contracting triangle that makes a double combination for the second wave, so it is a zigzag family pattern. Also, another guideline, generally speaking, is saying that the second wave should be bigger than 35% when compared with the first wave. So what you need to do is to measure the length of the first wave. So just take a Fibonacci retracement and you measure the length of the first wave. You just take a line that would make 35%. So this is the high of the top of the first wave, and this is 38.2. So probably 35 is something like this. So you should just take this trend line and you put it by the end of the first wave, and the second wave should be bigger than 35%. And as you can see, also this guideline is respected on this second wave. The same is valid for the fourth wave, and the guideline states that should be bigger than 35% of the third wave. That means that it should retrace more than 35% out of the third wave. So what needs to be done is to take again the same retracement, measure the third wave here, and look for 35%. As you can see, the retracement is actually more into the 61.8. So it is clearly higher than 35% retracement. The fifth wave is usually bigger than the fourth wave. Now, this is a leading diagonal. As you can see in our case here, the fifth wave is clearly bigger than the fourth wave. If the fifth wave would not have been bigger than the third wave, then this would have been called a failure. However, these guidelines mean that these are things usually to happen. So the fifth wave is usually bigger than the fourth wave. And the last guideline that should note that is that it is typical for the fifth wave to end before reaching the channel line. But again, like mentioned, this is not mandatory. So if this is the fifth wave here, and these are the highs for the third wave, so it is typical for the fifth wave to end before reaching the trend line. So either making a new high compared with the third one here, so making a new high around here, or I don't know, failing to try to make this trend line either here or here or here or here or here or even like this, but failing to meet this trend line. But this is not mandatory. It might be like this and still being a leading diagonal, providing all the rules are respected. So you should not take this one, let's say, for granted, but taking more of a guideline, like mentioned earlier. With these guidelines, basically, I am ending this leading diagonal subchapters. We've taken a look at the leading diagonal rules and the leading diagonal guidelines. This is the US dollar Canadian dollar daily chart, and you might say, yeah, well, if this is a leading diagonal, then what is this that comes afterwards? Well, we can't label it yet, but judging by the price action that we have, it might be that this is just an A, B, and looking for a C wave to the downside. And based on the amplitude of this move here, as you can see, it retraced. If you take a Fibonacci retracement that you go from the highs here to the lows here, so it retraced more than 61.8. It has the tendency of this being a flat, and if this being a flat, then you should count this one as a 3, so like an ABC. Look for the B wave and then a C wave. So it is possible that this move to the downside here to be an A wave. So to be an A wave, then to look for a B wave, and then for a C wave to the downside that should make this retracement for the second wave purple. But you might say, okay, what if the highs are going to be taken? Well, if this is a flat like it seems to be, then it might be very well possible that the D wave to travel above the highs established at the end of wave 1 purple or the fifth wave red. So it should not be different this case, and it should not invalidate your scenario of a leading diagonal. So let's say that we have a wave A to the downside already completed, looking for a B wave as being part of a flat, and then looking for a C wave. But in a flat, the C wave is always having a 5-wave structure, more likely an impulsive move to the downside in the form of 5 waves. So looking for these 5 waves either from here in the 103.60 area where price is, or even from higher levels, even higher than 104 and something. So looking for these 5 waves to the downside for this possible impulsive move to reach almost parity, because I'm looking, if this is the first wave and I'm looking for a second wave of this degree, then this second wave can only come here at around 50 and 60%. And if you take let's say if you try to put a number on it, then it's something like 0.99, so looking below parity. So if you also take into consideration the fact that the US dollar Canadian dollar is where it used to be, but it still is inverse correlated with the Australian dollar US dollar, so such a move to the downside of 300 pips in the US dollar Canadian dollar maybe will relate with a bounce on Aussie. But I would be also looking at the cross between the two, as the Australian dollar Canadian dollar as being apparently being on a third wave move to the downside. Anyways, the chapter with the leading diagonals is done here, and the next recording, the next subchapter that I would like to move forward to is the ending diagonal, and we will take a look at the ending diagonal rules and ending diagonal guidelines, if they are respected, and what to look for next. So until next recording, stay tuned please.